Good evening and welcome to the Voice of Latina, this very special program tonight honoring the legacy of Marta Garcia. It's one of 4 programs, and I have to extend a special thank you to Nancy Cabrero, who helped reach out to Congresswoman Nydia Velázquez. Welcome, Nydia. Buenas noches.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Oh, it's a pleasure. It's a real pleasure. I conducted a series of 4 very brief interviews, thanks to Rick Herrera, with Marta Garcia, just at the end of last year, beginning of this year, on the sad occasion of Nelson Landrieu, her husband's death. So right now we started with Malin Falou, who also talked about you a little bit and the relationship between you and Marta Garcia. And now you are the second, our second guest. Congresswoman, when did you meet Marta? And what was your first impression of Marta Garcia?
So I met Marta when I was working for the governor of Puerto Rico in the offices of the Commonwealth in 1985. And I used to have all kinds of meetings with community activists and community leaders to discuss the many issues that the Puerto Rican community was confronting in New York. And then when I decided that one of the most defining issues that I thought will empower the Puerto Rican community was the lack of registration, voter registration and voting participation. So I organized a meeting, and Marta came in, and she was just so vibrant, so dynamic. She was just ready to roll her sleeves and work. And I loved that disposition, that kind of energy, that kind of attitude, because she basically, she understood how important it was for the community to come together and provide real solutions. And I thought that by empowering through political participation the Puerto Rican community, that it will be a way to make the political muscle of the Puerto Rican community that until then was invisible, that will be a good contribution for all of us to make.
Congresswoman, by the way, thank you. We know you must be very, very busy at this time with what's going on in the world, in the country, in New York. So we really appreciate you taking this time. I became close with Marta this past 3 years because she chose me, or she tapped me to help run Latina, because she knew her husband's health was going down. So we made that transition, and she wanted to say, well, it's yours. Now I'm like, no, we want to be co-executive director. So in the context of that, we got close. And she was a volcán, yeah. as you were saying. And we noticed that you posted in your page, an obit or something about Marta, which was very inspiring to us here. And where do you think that link to our community? You're saying 85, you met, and you see this very well-disposed, let's go at him, let's do it. Where do you think that link, are you aware of how that link with our community came up? Was it through the press, through her press days? Was it just something innate in her from Guayama? What do you think? Where does that engagement come from?
Well, it was her nature. She was a force. She was fearless, and she didn't have time for complacency, and she didn't want to go into a meeting and waste time listening to everyone. She wanted for people to craft an agenda and execute that agenda, and let's go. And so that is what really attracted me about Marta, to the point that when I decided to run for Congress, she volunteered in my campaign. She helped me out. And then when I won, I brought her to work with me. And she went from being my press person to be the director of the office. And so it was a natural, it was natural for her to have this public relations kind of persona, that she was tough and she was fearless, but she was welcoming. And she was about building and broadening the base, and bringing other people into into the house or into any type of meeting. So that was, that was Marta, and Marta wanted her sense of justice. It was, so incredibly, you don't see that, she dealt with one issue and she felt, okay, let's move to the next one. And the same happened not only when she was working in my office by addressing the many issues, the lack of representation at the school central board of the public school system in New York, police profiling and police brutality, the lack of resources in education, in the arts. And then when she went on to create and be one of the co-founders of the Media Coalition, you did not want to be an executive of one of the network and face Marta Garcia, because she was she was tough and she will ask the hard questions and she will call you out. And she will say, we want diversity, not only in terms of the human resources at your place, but in terms of programming and content. And she was good at what she did.
She talked a lot about that, and she talked a lot. We invited Alex Nogales, so we had a chance to have those two together from the National Hispanic Media Coalition here at Latea, also at the end of 2019. How long was she director of the office, of your office?
I believe 2 years.
Wow. And I'm sorry, this might be, but so you with Marta, did you ever have a little disagreement or something? I know you are the Congresswoman, you're the boss. She signed off on your things and she was there advocating for you, but did you ever have,
No, look, I really liked her personality and she was tough. Mm-hmm. And I did not want to hire anyone to say to me, yes, ma'am.
Right.
I wanted for someone to say, Congresswoman, that is not the right way, or you should not get involved. And this is why you bring people in. You should not be in any way, threatened or feel diminished by the fact that someone who is working for you as director of the office will say to you things that you might not like, but at the end, sometimes you will say, yeah, she's right. Or you just open the conversation to listen to her. And that was a role that she played very well.
And, I am sure you're aware, because I think you've supported the Clemente Soto Vélez in its long trajectory, mm-hmm. Going almost 30 years now, or 25 and change. So Marta fought fiercely for this center. I mean, she had bigger scenarios, definitely, like the National Hispanic Media Coalition, mm-hmm. not to mention your own run for Congress. I mean, really things that have made a remarkable difference in the life of all North Americans, but especially Latinos and specifically Puerto Ricans. So what was your sense, when did you start hearing Marta talk about this Clemente Soto Vélez? How did you react to that? Tell us a little bit about your involvement, if you recall some of it at this point.
Well, we tried to save the center, right, and to make it more inclusive. But then the district changed the boundaries of my district, and it was not longer in my congressional district. It was in the other next door congressional member. So, but while we were there, she was relentless, and she wanted to save that center to promote actors and
visual
yes,
artists, musicians,
and all. Yes. Mm-hmm.
Do you have a favorite? In terms of actors, musicians, and visual artists? What are three that are dear to you that you like? Some artists that you might like.
I don't want to offend anyone. Look, all these paintings that I have are Puerto Ricans, and I am very, very proud to promote artists in our communities, and it is part of the fabric of who we are. For Martha, she was just multifaceted, that you cannot put her in one lane. She was very much so incisive in so many different areas: political empowerment, the arts, media, social issues. And I was amazed to see her commitment. Whenever she picked an issue, she didn't walk away. She was fearless, and she really believed in making, for her legacy and her contributions was to make sure that there will be Latino institutions, Puerto Rican institutions that would last, that were built to last, but that will become part of the larger and broader society here in New York City. So she was always demanding the type of inclusiveness that should be part of who we are in places like New York that is so diverse. Here we are today discussing police reform and Black Lives Matter, and the changes that we are demanding were changes that we have been fighting for so many, many years. And knowing Marta, I think that she looked down on us, and when she sees all these protests and all these marches, she knows that her work was not in vain. And that is what really is all about.
What about Puerto Rico? I mean, she was from Guayama. I've read that you're from Yabucoa. So
yes.
Did you ever share when you went, did you ever go down there together in the context of your political career?
No, we never did.
Oh, no. I see. Okay. And, I'm very curious. I know you're very engaged right now with the Small Business Administration and that kind of program. Did you have the seeds of that when Marta was in the office? What did you ever discuss some of that small business advocacy that you're really exploring right now when Marta was there? And
Miguel, when I went to Congress, I requested to be appointed to that committee, a small business committee, because I believe that, look, I didn't have big corporations in my district, but I did have a lot of small businesses, and they are the backbone of our economy, but especially so in our communities. The little guy who owns the pizzeria, or the owner of a supermarket, they are the one not only creating the jobs in our community, but they are writing the checks for the little leagues. So when you strengthen those small businesses, you strengthen our community. They are there, they are invested in making our communities better. And that is why I work so hard, especially during this pandemic, to make sure that they have not only access to affordable loans, but I included language that will make those loans forgivable, that they will not have to pay back that money if they rehire the workers that they had before the pandemic.
No, I think it's outstanding, that work that's been going on, because it's instilling a little security.
And by the way, it is important for the people that are watching that non-for-profits also qualify as entities that could access those loans. I have community-based organizations in my district that were communicating with me via Twitter today, thanking me because they got a loan for $3 million or $2 million or whatever. And those are non-for-profit organizations. So let me remind everyone that there are still $120 billion in this program. And I won for the beauty salon owner, for the leader bodega owner, for all these businesses and non-for-profits that if they need help, the money's there. If they don't apply, it's not gonna come to them.
Thank you, Congresswoman. Thank you, Nydia. What do you think? Do you recall coming to Latea and sharing with Marta here in the actual theater? Is there one day, one show?
Yes, I went to 1 or 2 shows with Marta. And there was a group of artists that came, I believe, from Argentina.
And maybe Tango Fever or something like that.
That's right. And we had such a great evening. It was just beautiful. And you know, to have this type of institutions that will do this type of events in the heart of a working class community is so important.
No, and Marta was constantly trying to bring more of the Puerto Rican community here, of the Latino community here. And I think it's significant what you mentioned before, because she was aware, you know, some people advocate, let's say, for the journalists, let the journalists be Latino or more Latino journalists. But she was looking at the whole picture, the consumer as well as the producer. And she was advocating for both sides. I want the public to have Latinos represented amply, and I want the actors, the managers, the directors of the cultural center to also be Latina or Latino. So that was very prescient. Usually we're either clients or maybe occasionally people advocate for us to be on some leadership positions, but to have a sense of both, that's different. So what would you think is I mean, this is advice for me, for Latea, for the Clemente, for your former district. How do we honor, how do we preserve, how do we have the legacy of Marta Garcia live on among Puerto Ricans, among Latinas and Latinos, and among New Yorkers, Puerto Ricans, and you know, what do you think?
Well, I will say that the way we honor her legacy is by forging ahead. It's fighting for the progress and the values that animated her life. So, you know, we could say whatever, but I think that those goals, that mission, that vision of Marta, not only to provide a venue for artists, but for the community to have access, that's important. And in a diverse place like New York, it is important. It is important for the leader, for the young student, Latino or Latina, to be able to come with their parents to Latea and see themselves reflected there, and to say to themselves, I could be her, I could be him. We cannot lose that. And there will be no future if we as leaders do not pave the way for the next generation. And for me, that represented and exemplifies what Marta did for all of us and for our communities.
I would like to just go for a minute to Maria. I mean, the Puerto Rican community experienced the island, a traumatic event, you know, every 100 years or something devastating. Did you have communication? What was your reaction to that? I know you were very busy and in the front lines and spearheading for assistance. Did you have any communication with Marta about this? Did you guys talk about it? Because I think Yabucoa got that's landfall. That was landfall in Puerto Rico. So did she call you or something? You know, because she's always very alert.
Well, we were always talking like every 3 months, every 6 months. I call her and ask about, her husband. But she did call me when she saw me. I was crying. She saw me on TV when I came back from Puerto Rico. I went to Puerto Rico, I think 2 days or 3 after Maria with the governor, Andrew Cuomo. And when I came back, I said, and I couldn't help myself. I cried. I said that the Puerto Rico that I knew didn't exist. The total devastation, the infrastructure, it was gone. And look, it took at least almost 12 or 14 months for Puerto Rico to get electricity back. And so she saw me on TV. Immediately she called me to find out if I went to visit with my family, which I didn't, because the roads didn't allow all the debris and the trees and everything else. So the governor didn't want to, take any risk while we were there. But it was just a very painful experience.
And going forward now, how do you see the recovery of Puerto Rico? I mean, right now we're in our own little world, not little, huge world mess with the COVID, but how do you see the Puerto Rican recovery? How do you see the future with this new? Well, there have been the earthquakes, and now there is the trauma. And even though that diverges a little bit from Marta, Puerto Rico was always in her mind. We talk Puerto Rico, mañana, tarde, noche, breakfast, lunch, and dinner.
Look, Puerto Rico was going through a fiscal crisis before Maria. And imagine that was compounded by the effect of Maria. So it will take at least 10, 15 years for Puerto Rico to be able to get out of that hole. And plus, you need to add the effects of the earthquakes. And another hurricane that has caused devastation to Puerto Rico, and that is Donald Trump. Yes. We have, Congress has appropriated more than $50 billion or $60 billion, and so little has made it to Puerto Rico. So Puerto Rico is going through a very difficult period, and I hope that at some point the Promesa board will conclude that Puerto Rico is in no position to pay back the public debt, and that debt, together with Elizabeth Warren, I sent a letter saying that we need to discharge the public debt because Puerto Rico is in no position to be able to pay that money back.
Very, very difficult times. And then there's the public, there's the island difficulty, and then there was the personal difficulty. When Nelson passed away, and in retrospect, 6 months later, 7 months later, Marta passes away. How did you experience the couple, if you ever did, or what did she tell you about Nelson and his
Oh my God, let me tell you what she always told me about Nelson. Nydia, he está enamorado de ti. Nelson está enamorado. All the time she was telling me, oh my God, you call, he wants to talk to you. I loved both. And they were an incredible couple that supported each other and that were committed to the well-being of our communities. You don't find that quite often. And, she will be sorely missed. And, my fashionista, I call her my fashionista, my fearless leader, my great friend. She was such an incredible human being, so compassionate, but at the same time, so tough, because she was committed to fight for justice, to fight for diversity, to fight for fairness. And she was not willing to back down. Never was she willing to back down from a good fight.
And that's precisely how she says it in the brief, 11 minutes that we have her on tape. And I feel so privileged that, it was one of those things where we started taping one because it was supposed to be 10 minutes. And I'm hearing Marta talk. I'm like, let's do a second one. Oh, a third one. And we did 4. And now that I think, what's 40 minutes? We should have done 80, 120, because there are so many stories. And she brought together so many people. So, I wanted to also touch base. I mean, since Marta is such an example of this Latina Puerto Rican woman, she gets into this marriage with an Uruguayan. What would you like to comment on our brothers and sisters from Latin America, like on some of those communities in this juncture with COVID? I mean, what about ya hablamos de Boricua, and we'll keep talking about Puerto Rico all the time, but what other communities are you concerned about? And you are, I mean, I know you have all your constituents, but talking about Latin Americans, who's in your, you're paying attention to right now?
Well, as a member of the U.S. House of Representatives, I really resent the fact that the United States have not fulfilled the role of a leader with Latin America. And that is shameful, especially now when we are in the midst of this pandemic. What happened to the United States being the leader of the free world and being in the forefront of science and providing resources to fight this pandemic. I am very concerned about Brazil, because of the pandemic there, and also the fact that you have a leader that doesn't believe in science, and so many other Latin American countries that are lacking the type of infrastructure in terms of a healthcare system to be able to provide the assistance and the need for people that are working people and families that are poor. That is an area. I just went to Central America with Nancy Pelosi, and I was one of the ones who really encouraged the members of the Democratic caucus to go to Central America so that they have a better understanding as to what are the root causes that lead families to leave those countries, El Salvador, Guatemala, Panama, and so on, Nicaragua, El Salvador, Honduras, and that was quite an eye-opening for the Democrats that were in that trip. So we need to do a better job at engaging with our brothers and sisters in Central and South America.
And if I may, I actually was in Honduras, and I had an extraordinary time there as a visual artist, and it felt so close to Puerto Rico. La gente era tan amable, so nice, so welcoming.
Very warm, very warm. Yes.
I felt los catracho. They call themselves catracho. I felt like I was back home in Puerto Rico. And I also wanted to respectfully address the issue. As a woman, here you are breaking ceilings right and left, like back in 1980s, and then you're getting to Congress and everything. And a lot has been accomplished, but a lot apparently needs to be accomplished. Not apparently, needs to be accomplished. And how do you compare the ceilings, powerful women and accomplished women and generous women meet in Latin cultures and in the United States of America? Because there are ceilings in both. And even though we have a remarkably bad rep in Latin country, because unos machistas, esto y lo otro, we've had all these women leaders. I mean, I don't know how many republics in Latin America and Puerto Rico have had a woman president, governor, and then here that seems to be so elusive. how do you compare that sexism in both cultures, and how has it affected you, and how do you push the envelope in both cultures?
Well, the fact of the matter is that many of us truly believe that Hillary Clinton won, but if it wasn't for foreign interference. But putting that aside, we have a long way to go here in the United States, and we are making some progress when it comes to women representation, because we have over 100 members of Congress, female members of Congress. And in terms of our Democratic caucus, the majority of the caucus is either Black, Latino, and women. So that is a big block. And that means that we have leverage and that we know how to use that leverage. You know, the PP program has been one of the most important programs that we passed to deal with this pandemic and to make sure that we injected trillions of dollars into our economy. Well, I was at the table. I was an important member of Congress that was responsible to design this program to rescue the American economy. So think about that. Nydia Velázquez, a Puerto Rican woman, chair of the Small Business Committee that played an important role in providing access to money that many of the businesses will not have to pay back. But we still have a long way to go, definitely.
What about your homologs or other women in positions in Latin political positions in office, elected office in Latin America? Do you have anyone that you keep a cordial relation with, or you trade stories, or that you're friends with someone in Latin America or in the Caribbean that is like yourself, an elected official?
So I liked the female president of Chile,
Michelle Bachelet.
Yes, and we have dinner together. I went to Chile, then she came to Washington. She also, Nancy Pelosi honored her. And so that is a woman that I really thought that was very smart and with a vision. But look, we have been so much involved with this administration's combating this administration policies that it has been quite an exhausting 3 years. I do not know how I keep my mental health, because the first action of this president when he took office was to issue the Muslim ban. Remember, to prohibit Muslim people to come to be admitted to the United States. Who was the first member of Congress to go to JFK to denounce that policy and to help release some people who came from Iraq that were caught
in limbo, right?
Yes. But this is a guy who was put on handcuffs and worked back in Iraq, worked helping the militaries, the American military people. And so he left because he feared for his life. Okay, so he left Iraq fearing for his life, and the welcoming that we gave him was to handcuff when he arrived in the United States. So we have been fighting so many issues related to this president that we really do not have, at least I do not have time to travel to those countries to try to forge better relationships with Latin American governments.
Well, we certainly hope here at Latea, we're trying to bridge that and create a more comprehensive link between theater and education. We have some board members. One of them is Chilean, by the way, Hedy Fight. If Hedy's watching us, a big shout out to Hedy. that, you know, where we feel that we gotta provide some more education about Latin America in this country to avoid some of the pitfalls that you're talking about. And Frank, we have Mateo would like a Zoom meeting because he would like to say hi. Mateo Gomez is a Dominican actor extraordinaire and one of the 3 founders of Latea, together with Nelson Tamayo and Nelson Landrieu, Marta's husband. And of course, Marta is the 4th founder, along with the center. I like to joke that they founded a theater and then they took over a whole building because that was, and I think that was Marta. That was the spirit of Marta. And since we're talking Latin America, I would also love to touch on a subject very dear to Marta's heart, for which she really advocated quite strongly, and that is the subject of our neighboring island of Cuba. And I know that Marta really was involved in La Casa de las Americas. Actually, Franklin Flores has agreed to come talk about Marta next week. I know you have all shared in that cause and cultivated La Flor de Amistad.
Let me say this to you.
Yes.
The first piece of legislation that I introduced in Congress 28 years ago was to lift the embargo.
Wow.
When Obama made the announcement, I was supposed to accompany him, but I wasn't able because I had Elizabeth Warren coming into my district. But I went to Cuba right after with Nancy Pelosi. And before that, I went under Bill Clinton. So I have always tried to bring the 2 countries together and to put an end to these ill-advised policies, you know, and still there because this president has been difficult when it comes to Cuba.
Very, very difficult. But you know, we really, some of us that also love that neighboring island and feel that regulate, not regularizar, you know, to bring the relationship back to normal. Do you think maybe there is hope for that in a few years, perhaps after this administration or something? Because there was the rapprochement. It was actually, the Cubans were very excited. My brother's a journalist. He went to cover the Rolling Stones in Cuba, for Christ's sake. I mean, you know, and next thing you know, we're back tied up. Do you think?
Miguel, when I went to Cuba and we saw young Cubans in their bikes and they saw us and they realized that we were Americans, they were all applauding. They were going like this. And it was so beautiful. We were so close to advance the establishment of relationships. And it's really painful to see where we are today, but I'm hopeful. I am hopeful. Coming November, that people will make a decision in this country and that better days will lie ahead of us.
Well, and before, I don't know if Mateo, what's the situation, but Frank is trying to get Mateo to zoom in to say hello, Congresswoman. But before that, and before we go to Marta's voice, because it's really inspiring, what is your encouragement? We have some amazing women in city council, some amazing leaders that we work with closely. And of course, there's the Manhattan Borough President, Gail Brewer. Then there's Carlina Rivera here in this district.
All these strong women, they're making a difference.
Yes.
And they're not taking enough for an answer.
Well, we are lucky. We're lucky to have them right now stewarding New York City, just as we are very grateful to you also stewarding resources for here, for Puerto Rico, sort of advocating for education, and especially for the small business, not just nonprofits and culture, but all the nonprofit, all the businesses, because it's really the backbone, as you said. Coming in right now is Mateo Gomez. We're looking to see if he has, you know, Mateo from your Latea experience, Nydia? Have you met him?
I don't know, maybe when I see him.
Okay. And then, you know, please, we will say farewell after Mateo greets you, and then we will leave Marta's voice. And so much of what you've spoken about her is reflected by her, non-apologetically proud.
Yes.
And so proud. And she comes off with that in the interview. So I'm very excited to have you hear that interview too in the privacy of your home.
I really miss her laugh.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Ms. Velázquez, for your help throughout the years.
Thank you.
All right.
Mateo is, again, the founder of Latea, a remarkable Dominican actor who's international by now, who's worked with Nelson, mano a mano, with Tamayo, mano a mano, and him and Marta had a special relationship. Anything else you wanna tell us, Mateo, before we cut to Marta's, before we say farewell and cut to Marta's?
I cannot see him. Is he on the phone?
I don't know why I only see my name. Let me see.
Well, just click on the video where it says video.
Video, start video. Okay.
Right.
Maybe I come in.
Yes,
drama.
sí. Good. Hola, Mateo. How are you?
Good. Good to see you. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Well,
yeah.
Thank you for everything that you're doing.
Thank
And we need to. You need to keep at it. We have to make sure that the institution remains for the future and future generation of leaders, and that we have this institution right there where it is today. And in any way that we could be helpful, please let us know.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Well, hopefully young people like Miguel, Frank, Tati, they'll keep the light on in there.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll be behind the scenes helping any way I can,
Right.
And we shall invite you, Congresswoman. Obviously, we did a Zoom memorial because of the situation the world is experiencing, and which New York is just starting to barely perhaps get out of, even though there's a lot of danger still. But we hope that Mateo and Frank, Tati, and myself, we can hold a memorial like the one she organized for Nelson like just 6 months ago. So we shall be inviting you when it's safe, when the world starts coming back as a keynote speaker for Marta's real person memorial coming up. Other than that, I would like to leave Mateo with any last words he wants to say, but I would like to thank you profusely in behalf of Marta's family, particularly her sister Nancy Alicea, who's been like a conduit. We met because of Nelson's passing, and we have been working together to honor Marta's legacy and to keep her alive, as Mateo and the rest of us keep, marchando en este valle de lágrimas, pero pa'lante, siempre pa'lante.
Oh, yes, pa'lante, siempre pa'lante. Yes, right.
Frank, you are the man. So should we go on to Marta's
Here we go.
eternal voice?
Yes.
So now you're going to make me cry.
Well, we're all going to cry. So, gracias.
Como no, como
Gracias.
siempre. Yes.
Ciao.
Encantado. Yes.
And we are here with Marta Garcia Landrieu, co-founder of Latea, actual co-executive director of Teatro Latea with me. I mean, she got me to join her, and we were talking about Nelson on our last podcast, and there was just so much to talk about. That here we are again because we didn't finish that conversation. Marta, you were talking something about a demonstration, something about politically that you were more feisty, and he taught you a little bit how to handle certain situations that you're impatient with.
Yeah, it's very ironic because, as I said, and most people know, Nelson was very gentle, and then going going to a relationship with, as he once called me, a wild one. It was very interesting. It was a yin and yang situation. So as I mentioned in the last interview, you know, he taught me patience, and he taught me how to, ¿cómo diríamos? To settle down a little bit, to be more kind or cognizant of that the other person or other thinkers, they might be right. And I never agreed with him on that one. So he was not much of a talker, but more of a doer. And in his silence and in his quiet way, he taught me, again, I repeat, that, yeah, the other person is also a human being, and I have to respect what they have to say, even if I don't agree with them. And we always had differences about that, because I said, yeah, but how about if, you know, this whole Latino thing, and, you know, they want to whip our ass. And I said, I'm not going to allow anybody to. He said, yeah, but listen to them. See what they have to say, that you might learn from it a little bit. And so we would negotiate a little bit, but I didn't go as far as he would go, to think that everybody's kind and wonderful and all of that. So, yeah, it was a yin and yang.
And, you know, and talking about yin and yang, I want to keep this, with your permission, of course, you know, as we talk about Nelson, I want to keep going back to his career, because, you know, like I said in the earlier podcast, you know, he's become a symbol to so many of us of so many things, that oftentimes when we're talking about him, because of that admiration for the advocacy, for creating a venue like Latea, for then having Latea, with your help and Mateo's help and Tamayo's help, sort of blossom into the Clemente, of course, with Ed Vega as well. And I want to now perhaps pick your brains just briefly about the film career, just as we talked about the highlights of the theater career in you know, in your eyes. What are some, because I know he was very active in film. I actually saw a great a short movie directed by Leo Curbelo with Nelson, and I don't remember the title right now, but it was exquisite. Yeah. So what about film? What were his biggest hits, if you will, in the film?
Well, the thing that I remember as his very, very close partner, we used to rehearse lines, was his incredible photographic memory. Sidney Pollack directed him in 2 movies, for example, the late Sidney Pollack. He did, we know who Sidney Pollack is. Anyway, he, in Random Hearts, he went over to me. I was standing, nobody was allowed in there, but of course, being me, I went into the area where they were filming. And he says, the camera loves him. One thing that stood out for him, for Sidney Pollack, was, you know how they say cut, cut, cut? He said, I only have to do 1 cut with Nelson all the time.
Do you think that's obviously theater actors are always prized, you know, because they have some wherewithal, you know, they have all the tools in the toolbox, and then they reportedly they just use fewer of them when they have to be on stage, because it's not 360 degrees, because the camera demands a little bit less in terms of expression and movement. But, you know, do you think that mastery that Nelson, you know, evidenced on stage and now on film as we're talking, do you think that comes from the Uruguayan training he might have had, or do you think it's a product of that plus the training at the American Academy of Dramatic Arts in New York? Or where does that chutzpah, or where does that wherewithal, you say, besides practice, of course, but any particular school? Do you think it's a Latin American thing? Do you think it was the New York training? What do you attribute it to?
I think it's more of a passion for what he loved to do more than anything in the world. I always felt I was competing with him personally when he was going to do a film and he was on stage. He belonged to that as opposed to being my husband. So it was his passion for the arts. By the way, he started to become an architect. That's what he wanted to do.
Oh, I didn't know that.
So that said, when he got here, he changed his mind, and the whole thing about what can I do on stage? This is my own thinking. What can I do on stage that I don't do on my daily living life? So he did everything with a passion when he got on stage. And that's why there was a lot of one takes only, because he gave himself totally to it, even neglecting a lot of stuff that I won't go into, but he was just that passionate, if I may repeat myself.
No, you're not repeating yourself, and as a matter of fact, it's a great segue to another aspect that, you know, that could take 4 or 5 programs in and of itself, and that is, I think a lot of people are curious. A lot of us would like to know, because it appears to be like a mythic moment now in time, unachievable perhaps in New York today. Talk to me about that transition from that unique place that was Rincon Taíno, where I believe the epic started, to La Tea. I really want to know about that bar that we all reverence and drink in right here at La Tea. And then, you know, from the great thing that was to constitute the Clemente Soto Vélez from La Tea. And how did Nelson, you know, how did Nelson go through those transitions? And of course, you know, time is always our enemy, but, you know, Rincon Taíno to La Tea to Clemente in Nelson's, you know, Nelson's adventure.
Well, the adventure starts before the Rincon Taíno. The Rincon Taíno was just a facility where he was allowed to have those people that he wanted, the actors, the producers, the singers, folklores, music, where he could bring in everything that he had a passion for.
Time out. So Rincon Taíno, to put some people that might not know. So Rincon Taíno, give me the place, give me the year.
Okay. So Rincon Taíno, we're talking about 1980, I think 1983, 84. And we're talking about the Lower East Side. So between 3rd and 2nd Avenue.
Okay, 12th Street, 1983. Right. Okay, sorry to interrupt you.
And then he continues to bring in El Jíbaro de Puerto Rico, Roy Brown,
André Jiménez, and
Roy. It became another love for him of the contributions that we as Latinos could make culturally in the United States or in New York. So he started dreaming away. This is what I like to do. This is what I want to see. This is where we could practice, bringing in those voices, bringing in the Puerto Rican Latino culture in, and we did plays there. We brought those artists that I mentioned.
What about Uruguay? What about tango? What about the Uruguayan side? Or there wasn't so many?
There wasn't so many. There were more productions from the Caribbean.
Okay, cool. Right, because that's a demographic that it keeps evolving, but I can imagine, I can see why. So that's where the vocation to host and to harbor cultural terrorists emerged, right?
Yeah. His reach then became bigger and broader. So we lost the license because there was we were selling liquor, and there was a church right down the block, and we weren't supposed to do that. And I called to the attention, and I said, we better get out of here real quick. And I said, let's sell the place. I think this story needs to be told. And the right to the lease, because we did have a lease. And we tried to negotiate selling the right to the lease, but I didn't know what poor negotiators artists were. And I sent them a loan. I was vice president of the National Puerto Rican Forum. I had my own job. I had things to do. And I sent them to negotiate. Well, we lost $33,000 because they did not know how to negotiate with the landlord, allowing a continuance of what we were doing at that site. That said, then we returned. Some of us actually did return because Teatro Solidaridad Humana started here, and at that time,
Wait, but we got to make a transition. So, and I'm sorry because I know some of this story, but I know some people are really curious because this is like the foundation and everything, and we're talking about Nelson's, Nelson starring, in this epic. He's the star of the epic. So there's Rincon Taíno, and then you have this problem because of the church, the liquor, and you have to move on.
That's the idea.
And where do you go from there?
We come here.
To 107 Suffolk, what is now known as the Clemente Soto Vélez.
Right.
And what was here? We're going to interrupt this because the epic continues.
Gracias a ustedes.
La voz de ella. Mateo, no te vayas, quédate para seguir tú y yo hablando.
Sí, sí, está bien.
Bye, Mateo.
Adiós, adiós, Nydia. Encantado.
Bien. Gracias,
Por favor,
gracias.
Otra vez, muchísimas gracias por siempre ayudar todo el tiempo.
Cómo no.
Marta,
Gracias.
como hermanas, y yo agradezco mucho eso.
A la orden siempre.
Bueno.
Mateo, mira, el miércoles que viene Franklin, o sea, tú aquí puedes, tenemos dos opciones, tenemos todas las opciones que tú quieras. Cada Zoom tú te puedes